All right, good evening, everybody. The time is 6:30, September 12, 2023, Abington Conservation Commission meeting. First item is discussion and possible vote on abbreviated notice of resource area delineation located at 161 North Quincy Street. So at our last meeting, Matthew discussed with the applicant about doing vegetation plots over on the property, and they were done on what date, Phil?
August 28th would follow discussions to ensure that we got it.
All right, Phil, you want to get up? And you guys all got this, I know.
Just a few hours ago.
Yeah, Ed sent it out yesterday to Matthew and myself.
All right. Well, thank you for having us here, and thank you for everyone attending both in person and remotely. That's great technology. What I presented the board with, and it's dated September 10th, is a report on the vegetative community assessment, calling it for 161 North Quincy Street. That's the amended address for the Petros site. And this report was based on a review of the vegetation that was done freshly from the beginning. It utilized the Massachusetts Handbook for Delineation of BVWs, and especially Appendix B, assessing the vegetative community, which is a multi-page guideline that is takes a little bit of interpretation. So I'll just explain how we have done that. Excuse me. The normal procedure is for plots to be set up in a circular manner. The Appendix B describes doing plots of four sorts. There is a so-called herb stratum, that's for short woody vegetation, less than 3 feet, plus all non-woody vegetation like ferns and things like that. That's typically done in a circular area that's 5 feet radius in size. There is also a shrub and sapling stratum or layer. That's typically done centered in the same spot with a 15-foot radius. There is a woody vine stratum, which is a 30-foot radius, typically set in the same spot. Things like grapevines and bittersweet. And a tree stratum, a tree layer, same thing, 30-foot radius. One difficulty about this site is that the spot in question doesn't lend itself to a simple circle that would encompass all vegetation of a similar type. It's a fairly narrow spot, and that's been part of the discussion for quite some time now. The area between delineation lines A and B is as narrow as 16 feet in some places, and a little bit wider at the ends, but you can't draw a 50-foot or a 30-foot radius circle and have it be shaped correctly. So what I did is I looked at the guidance in the vegetation assessment appendix, and it talks about, let's say, looking at a wetland. When assessing a linear wetland on the shoulder of a road, for example, the recommended circular plot dimensions should be adjusted to reflect the linear nature of the wetland. An adjustment is commonly required for small vegetative zones, i.e. smaller than the radii recommended above, and or in other areas. What we have here is a piece of land that actually is somewhat linear. So with a desire to cover a large enough area to be representative, I was thinking that I needed expert advice on how that plot could be shaped. So I called Mr. Andrew Poyant at the Southeast District, our faithful circuit rider for the Southeast District, and we discussed this. And he agreed that where the circles could be placed, could be encompassed in the area of interest, do that. Where they could not, stretch the circle out and make it actually an ellipse. Call it an ellipse, it would actually approach a almost rectangular in shape, but make it as large as possible so as to be representative. And because, as the appendix says, these plots, as described, are typically, they're actually considered small, so they should do replicates. So I did two sets of replicates of each of the 4 plots. And I'm calling them east and west because when you look at the engineering drawing of the site, there is essentially an east-west orientation of that space between lines A and B. And so with all that taken into account, I did 8 plots and looked at the at the dominant vegetation in each one, and again used the guidelines available. First of all, listing the vegetation species using the federally approved species list that categorizes species in whether they're wetland or upland indicator species. And that list was updated a number of times, and it represents how the feds and the states have come to agreement on what species are what. And there is a subset of that list for the north central and northeast states, and so that's what I utilized. The version to be used was version 3.5, which dates from the summer of 2022. And so using that list, I looked again at the species that were present on the property. And there were, the way it works out is you estimate the physical coverage of each species within the plot that you are looking at, and you estimate a percentage. And there are ways of doing it. I've received training in it from the through the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. The procedures for doing that, the techniques are pretty much the same, even though the species mix and some of the arithmetic has changed a little bit. So what we did, though, is we identified in the east plots there is a tree stratum, a shrub and sapling stratum, an herb stratum, and a woody vine stratum. The data sheets are set up in a slightly awkward way. The state designs the data sheets as if you're only going to do one set of plots, and because there's 2 sets of 8, there's a total of all these separate data sheets. But I determined the percentage, absolute percentage cover, and as it says in the guidelines, in order to minimize the risk of different individuals interpreting numbers differently, it says visual estimates of percent cover can be highly variable when observations from different individuals are compared. This variability can be reduced by using cover ranges. So whenever there is a percentage estimated, that's placed within a range, and the midpoint of that range is what the state dictates you use. So in other words, if something is 16 to 15%, they say call it 10.5%. If it's 26 to 50%, they say call it 38.0. That's all explained in the manual. So what one does is one does that for the most numerous, for the most dominant plants present, and you calculate the mid-ranges, you add up what the total is for them, and you calculate a percentage of that range. Just for example, if something falls, let's say the numbers add up all to 100, and one of the species, like red maple, is 50%, well, that's 50%. But if you bear with me, the math is such that you end up with a list of plants such that the most dominant 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes 4 plants are listed. If they achieve a certain percentage of dominance, whether it's 50% or down to as low as 20%, they count as a dominant species. And then when you've done that for all your plots, you go to the federal list and you see whether or not it's a wetland indicator. And then for every species and for every place that's listed as a dominant plant, you list it, and you count how many plants, how many species are dominant in those plots. And then you see whether the number of wetland plants is equal to or greater than the number of upland plants. And if it is, then from the vegetation standpoint, that dictates that the property be called wetland. If the number of upland plants is greater, that dictates that by this dominance test, that's the name of it, called the dominance test, then it's upland. What I determined is Having done all the math, and it's all laid out here and can be explained further if necessary, is there were 9 plants which were upland plants, which are dominant, and there were 5 plants which were dominant plants, which are wetland plants. So the upland plants species outnumber, the upland plant species outnumber the wetland plant species 9-5. And therefore, in my report, I suggest that the result be that the area between A and B should be considered upland, and the 2 areas are separate. I realize it's a bit complex. It's no more than middle school math, but the formulas dictated by the state require some interpretation, and the whole idea is the engineers have attempted to reduce the amount of individual variability in how you analyze percentages of plants. So the bottom line is the number of dominant plants in those plots, by my evaluation, it's dominated by upland plants. Not by a lot. There's a lot of red maple, there's a lot of poison ivy, and so on. But when you total up the number of species, it's 9-5 in favor of the upland plants. So my report is intended to support the recommendation made earlier this summer that areas A and B be considered as separate, standalone, isolated land subject to flooding. I'd be happy to handle any questions.
Who's Jim? I don't know who Jim is.
I don't want to step on anyone's toes, so.
Mr.
No, go ahead,
Chair.
Matthew.
Okay. So a couple of concerns. The first, Mr. Chair, and when I was out there on the 6th of July, one of the observations that kind of led to the concern that we were actually looking at a connected wetland is the fact that there was reed canary grass and jewelweed throughout that saddle area that we were talking about. I've got photographs of that. Those are FAC wet plants, and they don't occur in the data plot. So I'm a little concerned about that. I agree that I haven't had a chance to review the math behind these numbers yet. But it's not a simple number of plants against wet plants versus upland plants. So there's a little more math that I'll just check that when I have the opportunity to go through and look at the data plots. But one thing I'm concerned about is that the data collection, the data form in the handbook is 4 pages. And for the AB East, the only thing we've got are the vegetation pages. We don't have the soil or hydrology indicators pages, so those would have been good to see. So I think this is good information, and we need to digest it. But my inclination is to suggest that we make an effort to get out onto the site and look at where the plot was set and see if we're all in agreement with species ID that were there and so forth. I think that there's enough I'm concerned about that I think that I'd recommend that. I think we ought to do that.
If I may say, Mr. Chair, Matt makes good points. The simple fact is the zones located within the Area A delineation line, Area B delineation line, I looked at the property at the land between those 2 lines. The reed canary grass is concentrated within the Area A. It specifically says in the guidelines to take pains that the plot locations to be selected to ensure that the vegetative stratum being sampled is representative of the plant community within the zone being assessed. In other words, I didn't want to be zigzagging across the lines of delineation. I thought that was actually contrary to the intention of the regulation and the guidance for doing the assessment. And also, yes, jewelry is present, but if a plant is present in too small a percentage to make it onto this list, it doesn't make it onto the list. One could do probably lots of plots there, but you start to run out of space. If you go too far off to the sides, you're looking at areas that is not between A and B, but again, off to the sides. My philosophy is that we're looking at, as my report says, the delineation lines A and B. If you look at the engineering drawing, flags A10 through A13 and B16 to B19, it defines an area that's roughly rectangular, and in my view, a longer ellipse and a rectangle are very similar in terms of the area encompassed, and I didn't want to make them too small, but I also didn't want to create so many of them that I'm way off in left field to one side or another of the area that's in question. So I understand the question, but I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to follow through on the questions that's been raised.
I may be wrong, but I thought that you guys were going to coordinate.
Well, we did, we
So you
spoke
can
about doing this, and I'm not opposed to coordinating further, but we spoke about simply doing this, and the next step was to do it, so I've done it. Whatever next steps are required, so be it. It's just that the time frame hasn't been very long, so I'm sure that communications can happen that have not yet happened.
Jean.
Hi.
We can hear you,
Jean
Jean.
here.
Go ahead.
Hi. All right, so one of the things I did do today was go back and watch the 8/22 meeting. And I know that what was brought up by Matthew was that, again, there was canary reed, grass, jewelweed, buckthorn, red maple, poison ivy, and grape. And those were hydrophytic vegetation. He also mentioned that there was an S5 hydric soil indicator from the Munsell chart, redox within 4 inches. They found redox within 4 inches, and it tied A to B. I guess I was kind of expecting that, along with the evaluation of the plants. And I think when I looked at the meeting, I took the timestamp of 58.31, where, you know, Matthew had said once he received his report, he'd like to get out to look at the area to see where, you know, the testing was done by Phil. And so that they could get an idea to keep this moving along. So that's, and just getting this report today, I really haven't had a lot of time to digest it. So it's my comments.
Mr. Chair, if I may say.
Yeah, go ahead.
My understanding from our last meeting is that we were going to concentrate on looking at vegetation moving forward, and that's what we've done. That's why I've done it this way. I didn't look at soils again because that wasn't the mission as I understood it for me to carry out at this point in time.
Well, we do know that plants tell part of the story and soils tell a lot more. So I guess that's what I was kind of expecting, the confirmation with the plants as well as some sort of indication from the soils, because I mean, that seems to be the sticking point for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but
No, I thought it was just the vegetation was what we were looking for too after the last meeting. what Phil was saying. I don't remember any discussion about soil samples.
I think the thing is, for me, I was hoping they could get together to do this because you were describing this very, complex way of having to deal with the site to make it as accurate as possible to sample. But then we could say, hey, Matt, can you go out and he might be setting it up a completely different way. So what I would like to see is the two of you come together and have an agreement as this is the way it should have been set up or shall be set up, and then get the data that way and agree or disagree with the data. Because, we have a peer reviewer, I'd like them to peer review what you did, but to me, it seems like it would be faster, because, he could come, Matt can go out and say, well, I did it this way, and that you did it the wrong way, and then you can come back and say, no, I did it the right way, and back and forth, and we'll be here forever. So I think my suggestion for the board is to consider having the two of them work together, make certain that we're all on the same page and we're using the exact same data, techniques, et cetera.
It sounds like he's using the industry standard data techniques, and I think given the plot layout, the general layout on how it is, we also have a due diligence to Mrs. Zachariah to try to come to some sort of determination, because this has been going on for how long now,
6 months or something?
you know?
Not 6 months.
Feels
No,
like
not
6 months.
It doesn't,
I
it's
mean,
not. But then we have
No,
our peer
quite a while.
reviewer who is saying he has concerns.
But you spoke with Andrew too, right, Andrew Point?
I did. We spoke specifically about how to lay out the plots in this somewhat challenging area, and we spent about half an hour on the phone. This was near the end of August, and I went back out again after I had initially collected data to just make sure I was, in my view, complying with his recommendations, and so that's what we've done. It was also my goal not to have this go on and on. I'm sensitive to making good use of the commission's time and the applicant's time and so on, and as one who's being paid by the hour, I'm sensitive to that too. But I
You're the
obviously...
only one here.
Well, I'm familiar with not being paid by the hour. That's way too familiar with that. But it has been many months, and I'm interested in basically having the commission do what it feels is right. So I don't think I can really add any more to what's in my report at this point in time, but thank you.
Yeah, get up there.
Yeah. It's Zachary at 161 North Quincy Street. I just wanted to say I'm sorry that the report came so late. Mr. Clemens has been struggling with pretty severe health issues for the last few months, and I wanted to thank him and thank God that he was able to do the report at all, having struggled through. But, that's the reason why the report was late, and I apologize.
And no, and you were forthcoming with me, you told me that, I just didn't
Yeah.
want to, I don't want to,
No, I know, that's why I wanted to
Share that
point-
information with everybody.
Absolutely, I understand, and that's why I wanted to point out why it was today. I would have had it in your hands much, much sooner, but anyways, I'm glad that we had it done, that's all. Thank you.
I want this to be done too, but I want it to be done right, and I really wish the two of them could get together, because I'm always going to have doubts about this now in my head.
It was
Okay.
my impression that the biggest question that we're waiting on is the status of the vernal pools, which I think after we viewed the property, we've determined that it was not, so.
No,
well, that's two separate issues. Now we're talking about this area right here between A11, or no, A10, B16, and A12, B17.
Didn't he
if
say
they're
he talked to
connected.
Andrew already about those
Yeah.
areas?
Andrew
why.
was one of the first people to point out they might be connected in the first place.
Right, but
Our peer reviewer is saying the exact opposite in some cases of what the applicant is saying. And we hired him to be an independent, completely from us, independent from the applicant. And I think he's done a really good job, and if he still has concerns, and it's just about this one little thing, I think we should, I'd really like to very, quickly get them both out, get it done.
But we've said that about everything, we just keep pushing the goal line back, it
Yeah.
seems like.
Can we take a vote and make it subject
Yeah.
to?
Can I just say something too?
That would change the whole.
It changes
all of
this. It changes the whole.
Hello,
Sorry, Jean.
Mayor, Mayor, all right.
Go ahead, Jane.
Hi. Again, I want to do the best job that we possibly can. We did this going forward and we got a peer reviewer. He made some very good points and I haven't heard really anything to the contrary to what he has said, Matthew has said. I wished and I hoped that he could get out to the site to confirm and say, yes, Phil is absolutely correct. But I still have that doubt. I'd like this to move along as quickly as possible too. Our job is to do the best job that we possibly can as thoroughly as we can. That's why we have Matthew as the peer reviewer to run that interference and go through the technical aspects of determining whether it's connected or not, because it does make a big difference on this property and I want to do what's right for everybody. So,
I mean, that was one of the big reasons at the last meeting, we said we wanted them to work together, because they worked together and they did it. We'd be voting on this tonight.
right, and like I said, I did go back to the 8/22 meeting and I looked at the timestamp 58:31, I think I wrote down, and it says he would like to see where this analysis was done. And so he wants to be working with him. He wanted to go out, see the site to move the process along because it is important to Mr. Zachary as it is to us. I mean, we don't want to keep this going, but I mean, I understand from when this first came before us, we talked about peer review, then we waited and we got a peer reviewer. And then, from there, we didn't have any meetings in July. We had some other issues had nothing to do with Mr. Zachary. It was all on us, but, I think we're doing as thorough a job so far, and I'd like to see that continue.
If I may, respectfully, I understand the need for due diligence, I really do. And I don't have the, unfortunately, advantage of having reviewed the last meeting, but if I remember clearly that the instruction was to have us do the vegetation study, and then and if I remember, Lynn had told me to make sure that I forward the results to Matt, meaning that it would have already been done and Matt would have gotten the results, not to schedule both of them come out together. That was not my understanding, and that the vegetation study, having been conferred with the DEP district rider, that it was, being done correctly, and almost 2-to-1, like 9-to-5. I mean, I don't understand this as well as any of you, and certainly not as much as a scientist, but 9-to-5 being upland to wetland, to me, that's pretty clear that it's an upland area. And I just would respectfully request, based on the vegetation study and all the prior months of research and submissions, that the ORAD be approved. That's all. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm still having problems when people go to speak to the stand microphone. It's just not coming through very well.
Us too, Gene, or just up at the podium?
At the podium
Okay.
mic seems to have a lot of feedback to me and it just echoes a lot. I mean, I can hear Lynn, I can hear you, I can hear Kevin.
Well,
I mean-
turn on the microphone over here and then we'll use the podium. But have sit around, sit at the table, it might be easier.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Anybody else have any questions?
I think my biggest issue, if we're gonna hold this up over this one small area of vegetation that clearly wasn't large enough to make this report, that we're gonna delay for how much longer for the potential that, again, if this is a standard report that's being done, and just because it was viewed on the site in a particular area, but wasn't large enough to make that particular area as it was zoned.
It changes all of that. If they're connected, it goes from ILSF to BBW, this whole area. And so,
So there's,
But why wouldn't it be recognized when he was out doing his original? Either one of them. I'm assuming
No, he
you've walked
did.
the site correctly? Correct?
Several times.
yes,
So what happened was originally they came in with plan pretty much similar to this. This is just a little bit larger. And they were saying that this area was not connected. And after the first site walk, it still wasn't considered connected. Then after Matthew did the second site walk, right, Matthew? Was it the second site walk, then you
Yeah.
guys thought there might be a potential connection?
yeah, we could see a clear evidence of a hydrological connection. We looked at the soil in that saddle between sort of, it's a shape formed by B17, B18, A13, and A12, right? That kind of, I forget my geometry. Is that a rhombus? You know, that area there. If there's a connection, if that is wet, by the definition of the Wetlands Protection Act, if it's BVW, then the whole A and B classify as bordering vegetated wetland, and that changes the permitting landscape for the site. So we saw clear evidence of hydrology in that area. We looked at the soils and saw hydric soil indicator, S5. And what I reported at the last hearing was that the vegetation, there was jewelweed, red maple, reed canary, poison ivy, buckthorn, and grape. And so that's really what it comes down to, whether or not I think the hydrology and the soil are there. And so it's a question of in that particular area, is there hydrophytic vegetation? And so, what I need to do is look at Phil's assessment and run the math and see if it jives. But it's concerning to me that, as an example, jewelweed didn't make it onto the list of species observed. So I'd like to see where that plot was, like we discussed, and so I think that makes sense. But I certainly defer to the commission's sense of how to proceed.
I think I mentioned the same thing when I looked at your report and you had reed canary grass, jewelweed, poison ivy, red maple, buckthorn, poison ivy, grape. And yet when I looked at Phil's report, I'm seeing bittersweet, Virginia creeper, fox grape, oriental bittersweet, and red maple, red oak, quaking aspen, and eastern red cedar. Again, to me, where this is such a critical little piece, I mean, it's going to determine whether it's an ILS, 2 ILSFs, or one big giant BVW.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Phil, just go sit in front of that microphone over there. See if she can hear better. Gene, let us know if you can hear this better.
Okay, how is that for everybody? Is that all right? Can you hear me, Gene?
Yes, I can, much better, thank you.
Good. Just to be detailed, we need to not just list off names of plants. We need to look at dominant plants. we also need to be very clear about some things. Matt, I hope that you can, if you want to check anything, please check this. Check, fox grape is considered FAC up on the Army Corps list. It's not a wetland indicated plant. I looked at that until I said, good grief, that's actually a very important point. I'd like to be clear about that. I would also point out that the things that we just named, eastern red cedar, yeah, that's on my list, but it's not a dominant plant. It doesn't count in the vote, so to speak. Red maple counts, but red oak also counts. There's a significant amount of canopy cover from red oak. Glossy buckthorn, I included it here because there's a lot of it there. But honestly, Matt, I could not find that on the Army Corps list either. I couldn't find it on the list in anything. I think that's a very important point. I thought, as a biologist, not as a list reader, but as a biologist, I thought it deserved to be counted because it's very common, and that's why it's listed in my evaluation. But other things also count. The Oriental bittersweet, it doesn't jump out at you the way some plants do, but there's a lot of it there. And that is a FAC up plant, and that does qualify as dominant, so that's listed. The shagbark hickory, there's a variety of size individuals there that count. There's fewer individuals than, let's say, glossy buckthorn, but some of them are quite sizable, and they do qualify as a dominant species, and that's why it's listed as such. Virginia creeper, one of your less obvious plants, but it's very, very common on the site. It's a very useful plant for delineators, and we treated it as such here. So it's not just ticking off names of plants, it's really putting them to the test of the dominance and the percentages, and also being very, very sure that they are the right plants to use. I was frankly quite surprised that Japanese knotweed doesn't appear on the Army Corps list. Talk about a common plant, which is, in my view, it's not a wetland plant, even though it survives being washed down rivers and takes roots on sandbars all across North America, to our regret. But there's a lot of Japanese knotweed there. Did not count that, didn't use that, because it's not on the list. So we didn't attempt to utilize that as evidence of the upland nature. So the formulas and the lists, I hope they don't ever try to teach this on the MCAS, because the kids will be challenged. But still, it's not difficult to understand when you put the time in, and that's what we've done. And so again, I simply stand by my report, and thank you for your time.
I think the whole reason that these formulas are in place is because it's going to be difficult to get 5 people in the room all decide on the same percentages of vegetation on the same plot, everybody looking at the same plot.
Mm-hmm.
That's my 2 cents.
I didn't hear that last exchange, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry?
I didn't hear that last exchange.
I said that given the formulas the way that they are, you could put 5 people on that land, and the same 5 people are going to come up with a different ratio.
Which is why it'd be good for them to go together.
Again, I entirely defer to the commission's sense of needing to move things along. However, it would be good to, at the very least, get a chance to run the numbers that Phil has presented. I didn't have a chance because we just received these data sheets. So I think that would be a worthwhile exercise. You know, I do think it'd be worthwhile putting eyes on it and seeing if there's agreement over the species that are within that saddle area. But you know, I think that's that comes down to to your kind of sense of whether there's a strong case that's been made that the two areas are not connected.
I think that's fair. I mean, the report, again, I mean, it came over Monday. I just got mine today. I mean, I always thought that red oak and quaking aspen and eastern red cedar were wetland indicator trees. Are they not? I don't know. I mean, I can look it up.
No,
They're not.
no. But, you know, I don't know if, again, I don't know what the numbers were that were found, but if the red cedar is essentially providing trace cover, 5%, so we'll have to just do some math and
Okay.
see, you know, how that shakes out.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, would it be out of order for these two gentlemen to have a conversation and see if they can come up with a reasonable time frame to either get together or explain these numbers while we table this and move to the next agenda point? Would that be a reasonable discussion that they could have to
What, you mean talk now, then?
try
Yeah,
to talk
you're
now
back.
and see if they can't come to some sort of understanding to the numbers and make a better
Outside the
explanation?
meeting.
Yes, outside the
Then
meeting.
come back
We
later
can
on?
continue the meeting and then come back to this agenda point. And we
Try to
can
get a
either-
vote tonight.
I got no problem
I don't know
with
that
that.
they-
Matthew's gonna be, talking with us for Zero Summer Street after this, so
I don't think
there's
he's
not
gonna
gonna be much
help.
time. No, that's what I'm saying, we gotta do the bridge first. Anyways.
He hasn't had a lot of time to look at it. I would like for them to talk together about it and see.
I'm
he
just thinking if we
agrees.
can settle some of the differences that they may have right now with their
I don't know if they'll be
industry
able to do
philosophies and come back with a, like I said, I think if we get 5 people on the land, that it's gonna be 5 different opinions of what's going
Right,
on.
then
And
we'll
if
be
they can
back to
come to
square
some
one.
sort of, exactly, if they can come up with some sort of common ground as far as where they're at, based on the study that was already performed, then we can move forward or not move forward, or elect to have everybody out at the site again.
Can I just interrupt for 1 minute? So obviously you're looking at plans in front of you that show the areas that Phil went out to. Does Matthew have that same map to look at?
Gene,
I'm not
sure.
Okay.
One dated 6/28/23.
No, I know, but I'm saying when he went out and did his evaluation, is that, I mean, I don't know where they were done on the map as it relates to the map. Were you guys able to,
I see what you're saying.
do we know where these areas, I mean, I'm trying to look at my map and try to figure out where these evaluations were done, and I don't have the benefit of seeing anywhere.
Gene,
I
I'll have Phil tell you where, based off of the closest flags, I guess, you can tell us where you did the.
Well, I mean, to save time, if I could have the flag numbers, I can do that while,
Yeah.
again, I haven't really had the opportunity to go through this and look myself, but okay, yep. So the first one, just for an example, you have AB West, 1404 feet, 26 by 54 feet. You got fox grape, Oriental bittersweet, Virginia creeper. Do you know what flag stations that was near?
It was near all of them. If you look at the engineering drawing, I believe Matt was suggesting early on that A12 and B18 might connect, and A13 and B19 might connect. That's front and center of where the plots were. The 2 small plots for the herbaceous layer and for the shrub layer are centered not quite touching, but side by side there, almost like links in a chain across that narrow rectangular area. And the larger plots, picture two long elliptical eyes with the pupils close together, almost like a cross-eyed thing. I looked at the vegetation in the area that was of concern, but in order to have areas large enough to qualify, even as small plots under the state guidelines, you had to enlarge it somewhat out towards the east and the west, hence my choice of terms, east and west. So in my report...
Wouldn't that have included the canary reed grass and jewelry?
The canary reed grass is on the inside of Area A. I did not count the area inside Area A because that's not the area that's being evaluated. I was evaluating the area outside Area A. It's near it, but I didn't cross the line in order to follow the guidelines. It says specifically, the sampling plot should not include vegetation from any other vegetation zones, i.e. should not extend into an adjacent community having different vegetation, etc. So I tried very clearly to confine our discussion to the areas between the two proposed delineation lines. Whether it's on a small plan like mine or a bigger one like they have or out in the field, if you walk the zone between the lines for A and B, you're walking right through the plots that were used for the study.
Yeah, I mean, the crux of the matter is right in the middle of that shape formed by A12, A13, B17, and B18. It's what is the vegetation that is in that saddle? You know, that's ultimately the question, because that's going to determine whether those two areas are connected. So, you know, it's not a, we don't really need the demonstration of upland versus your wetland. You know, we're trying to determine what's in that location that connects the two wetland systems. And
Are you proposing a microplot? It wasn't my, I'm sorry, Matt, it wasn't my intention, Mr. Chairman, to establish microplots. The plots that I used are already small by the definition of the standard. I think also I was looking at, again, I'm a biologist first and a delineator second. I was looking at the whole landscape there and saying to myself, what is it that we're protecting here? And what is the nature of the the spirit of the Wetlands Protection Act as well as the details on the ground? And nature doesn't always follow exact guidelines, but we did the best we could to put the two together here, the nature of what's on the ground and the guidelines for engineering interpretation of what's on the ground. I feel like I'm probably just saying the same things I've said before. I don't want to waste anyone's time, but we looked at it very thoroughly, and not the clearest case you'll ever see. That's why it's not like 10 to 1. It's if you look at the count of species 9 to 5, might even be closer than that if someone else looks at it. They might say it's 8 to 6.
Which is what Rich is saying.
But all I know is that I spent many hours there, and I crunched the numbers, and I checked the lists, and I quality controlled them the best I could. And in this particular case, that was my particular answer. So I'll just turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
What do you guys think?
If we're considering areas outside of these plot plans, have we considered the areas south and north of these areas? Is anything that's developed on this property in comparison to what's north and south of this property going to affect what's on this land?
Like,
you- as you
is this
come
gonna
on to-
affect this area?
Is that gonna, whatever development that happens, or however he chooses to move forward with this property, is it gonna have a negative effect on either one of these properties as it relates to the conservation or the preservation of the properties? Because those properties are well established and certainly are not friendly, I guess would be the best way to put it as it relates to.
Yeah, but then you can look at the property that's on this side, right? And that side is.
But that's
is
gonna be
okay.
delineated and that's not gonna be,
Right, but this has a big, knowing if this is an ILSF versus a BBW is gonna have a big protection for this. So, and we already know this is a BBW. So things that potentially could be built here could have an effect on that and then the state park area.
But they shouldn't, because whatever they build, they're gonna have to build to the standards.
gonna
so
have
they're
your
gonna
standards
have
and your
an
buffer
adverse
zone.
effect on those areas.
Right. But this is the, sort of the key to the whole thing. If there is a connection, then we're talking about a huge
It
BBW.
gets like,
If they're not connected, then it has less protection. And so the question is,
the restrictions, if this is this area right here is connected, now instead of an ILSF, it's one big contiguous BBW, which means whatever they plan on doing with this property, they could probably cut the scope in half, because just to mitigate whatever they want to do is going to be huge. Whereas if it's not connected, they have a lot more options.
I just think part of our job here is to also protect the wetlands as well as protect and preserve the owner's
Right,
rights to do
and,
what needs to be
uh,
done on that property.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Gene.
And again, that is the big concern, are they two ILSFs or is it one big giant BBW? And I still go back to Matthew's first report. And when you look at a Munsell chart and you see hydric soils, Andrew has always said, you can look at the plants, but the soil tells the story. And that's my sticking point.
But I mean, Andrew's been out there.
No, he hasn't.
Or,
no, he hasn't.
oh, he hasn't?
But Matthew
I mean,
said
he-
there is hydric soil in that section.
But I mean, he's been in contact with
He
both of them, I
contacted him
mean.
about how to do the plot, like the technical aspects, but Andrew hasn't weighed in on anything else.
So this is based on the
Using the-
guidance that Andrew's given, though.
Yeah,
Andrew gave him guidance as to
How to perform the plots.
perform that one thing.
The one
As it
thing that-
relates to the
one thing that-
vegetation?
The one thing that we asked,
Right.
Okay.
But in terms of the soil,
which we didn't ask for.
right,
asked for a
but
vegetation
Matt
plot.
had already taken samples and found it to be hydric soil. And that's one of the big things you're supposed to consider is, there's three things. You're supposed to, according to the handbook for delineating wetlands, one is vegetation, one is the soil, and the other is other indications of hydrology.
My fellow commissioners, may I just make a comment? When you turn and face each other to talk, that's when we're not hearing you at home.
Oh,
Because you're not speaking, you guys aren't speaking into the mic, so it's like you guys are having a conversation. I can catch pieces of it. I don't know about Matthew, but if you're not speaking and you're turning and looking at each other, we don't pick it up we're not
Okay.
picking it up. I don't know why. Sorry.
Closer to the mic. So the three pieces of evidence that we need are vegetation, soil, and other indicators of hydrology. And someone could say, well, this whole area, right, when we came in, that was just like, what, people came in and they were just, and it was just pure mud. But it could, there's no vegetation there. So you have to look at other things like, what's the soil looking like? So we have a piece of evidence saying that there is a connection because it's soil. And Matt is saying we have evidence that there's hydrophytic, Matt, is that how you say it? Hydrophytic vegetation. And Phil is saying there's not hydrophytic vegetation, but he hasn't given us soil data.
One other thing too, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry. When Andrew had gone out on a site for a site review on another piece of property, we ran into a similar situation where the wetland scientist had looked at the plants and made her marked or put her placement of her wetland determination, her line. And Andrew took it upon himself to move to a completely different area and took his Dutch auger out and started going down, and he went down 10 inches and found hydric soil. So he looked at the wetland scientist for this other site, and it can be seen, even though the plants around it say no, there is a connection. So those things stick in my mind, going out with him, having him show us, and that's where my mind is at.
But is it reasonable to expect Andrew to go out and dredge every, plot out this every square foot and plan accordingly?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is going out with him, having him show us, and being with him on other sites, and he would be talking to the other wetland scientists, we would hear the conversation, and it was something that was missed on something totally different on another situation. I'm just saying, here I'm stuck because our peer reviewer has found hydric soil in this little saddle area. And he compared it to S5 on the Munsell chart. And that to me means a lot. That's all I'm saying.
Again, respectfully, if I remember from last time we were discussing, one of the things that we talked about is the terrain is really rocky there. And one of our contentions was this has been the wettest season, spring and summer, since 1955. It broke records. And that was the highest in recorded history. And so that's what led us to say, and if I remember Matt specifically saying, he conceded that, what we need is a vegetation study. And if the vegetation study shows that it's, an upland area, then those two areas are separate ISLF. That's what we went and did, is the vegetation study, and now we're coming back to the soil again and coming back to more and more studies that is just going to go on and on. I would respectfully request a vote, only because we've done everything we've been asked to do. And the last thing Matt said was, if a vegetation study happens and it shows an upland area, those two areas are separate. Those were his exact words sitting here. And then I was told to make sure he gets the report. So my understanding is have Tunk Associates go out and do it again, do a vegetation study, get the report into Matt's hands, get them into your hands. And as I said, I apologize that it was a little delayed only because of health issues, but that's what I did. So this can go on and on and on is my fear, and the window of anything happening with this is just about closed. So it might not matter anymore after this. So I apologize, but anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
You guys think?
I
say we take a vote?
Vote, yeah.
Let me open it up to the public first. Anybody have any comments? Matthew, do you have anything else to say, or?
No, I think that you've got the discussion that is out there and a few lingering questions, but ultimately it's the applicant's prerogative to request that you make a decision here now, and so if you're comfortable with making that, then, that's your prerogative.
Well, the other thing too, we haven't discussed is the potential vernal pool too, before we take a vote. We need to discuss that because it's all encompassing in the ANRAD. And I know,
And
no, go ahead.
we had kind of discussed that, understanding that, under your bylaw, there's a presumption. And again, that comes down to, sort of the debate over how that was evaluated, through time by Phil. My sense is that when you have something that looks like it might be a vernal pool, you really need to get in the water in the springtime, using your polarized sunglasses and dip net and do a thorough evaluation. And it was indicated that kind of survey was not completed. So I think that, in my mind, that bears consideration as a presumptive vernal pool until that kind of study is completed to demonstrate that it is or isn't. So on that question by itself, I'd recommend that you find that presumptively a vernal pool until a springtime in water survey is completed to demonstrate that there's no evidence of vernal pool indicator wildlife.
Phil, do you want to get up and speak about the vernal pool, or?
I'll say one thing, that might not be what you expect.
We updated our regulations so that we'd make sure that any studies on the vernal pool will be done.
Vernal pools are great things, and I love them, and I have a hat from the association and everything else. So I'm always on the lookout for them. If this were to be looked at again, there was someone, not me, who I know has certified many, many vernal pools throughout southeast Massachusetts, who might be available to the applicant or whomever, or to the commission for that matter. So I would say that in the interest of everyone's confidence, should that be important enough to look at, there are resource persons other than myself who might be the best choices to do that.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. May I just make a quick? So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just remind, this is just a renewal. This whole thing was a renewal. Back in 2015, this area was inspected, it was vetted, and it was determined by this commission and by the people back then that it was not a vernal pool. It was looked at. So, and over the course of the last 8 years, since 2015, I've had an environmental scientist come out for 8 years, multiple times at different seasons to look at it. When we went out in late spring, early summer, which was in June, with BSC, that area was completely dry. One of the understandings I have is the definition of a vernal pool is it has to hold water for 2 months straight. Again, I go back to how much waterfall we had over the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, we had so much water that it was flooding everywhere. Look at Lemonster. And there was a state of emergency called for that. It collected water. I went out yesterday, which is the very next day, and I took pictures. I don't know if you guys had gotten them or not.
Yeah, right there.
It had already drained. If something's draining that fast, it just stands to reason it can't hold water for 2 months straight in order to be a vernal pool. That's just my contention, and I'm just, again, learning as I go. I'm sorry if I'm not 100% on, but some of the stuff I'm looking at is very, like some of the vernal pool definitions. I can't see how this could fall into that category. And once again, it was already looked at, like back in 15, and determined that it wasn't. And since then, it's been looked at over and over and over and over, and twice by BSC, and there was no evidence found either time that it was a vernal pool. So it could forever be potentially turned into one, but anyways, I apologize.
So the problem is that we can't consider data from the past.
No,
We
this
can
is from the
only
past.
look
This has been looked at again.
now.
Yeah,
And
it's been
that's
looked
why
at.
we're back here, because you
Yeah.
can only, because things changed, lots of things changed.
You're absolutely right, but
We have
it's
the
been looked
effects
at
of
for the last
climate
8 years.
change.
As
We
a
have
matter of fact,
everything
as soon as
else,
last
right?
June,
It's the
it's been
same.
looked at by your peer reviewer twice.
Right.
If it's not holding water,
But no. So you can't look at that unless you're looking from April to May. Doesn't matter what's going on right now. We can only look at April and May.
you're
for
right. My
delineation.
contention is it has to hold water for 2 months to be a vernal pool.
But
And-
no. So not during this time of year.
No, I understand,
That's-
during those months, I'm just saying it drains so fast. It drains so
But when you have
fast.
frozen ground, it's not gonna drain as fast.
I-
And so we have the thawing. So this is the reason why they say you need to do the delineations during these months. So looking at data during, any time after March 31st, you're not gonna get good information. You can do what Matthew did, which was so there's two things you're looking for: biological characteristics and physical characteristics. So Matt found the physical characteristics of a vernal pool, and as he mentioned, we'd have to go back later and actually look to see if there's biological characteristics. If there's biological characteristics and physical, then yeah, it's a vernal pool. If we don't see the biological, then it's not. So there appears to be some of the evidence, and that's why he called it potential vernal pool. So that's the thing. I know we have lots of pieces of evidence going on here, but one of the things is that you need to make sure that the evidence that you have is correctly gathered. My graduate student committee advisor was a bioinformatician, and he was always saying garbage in is garbage out, in terms
Gotta go.
of how you interpret things. So we just have to be really careful that the time that we're looking at the data, and it's very easy to go, oh, well, there's a really, big storm, but we can't look at that time period. It doesn't, this isn't the evidence that we can use.
He said he's been having it looked at though for 8 years.
Doesn't
Correct.
matter. We can't consider that. And when did he have it done, looked at? If
At
you
all
go in
different
like a
seasons.
June,
Yes, no,
or-
I believe in all the different seasons, but I believe he has come out between February and March to look at it specifically, because there's been several times that I've had to have him out for different things
Right.
and it
and
was
then
right
we
after.
can't look at that data either. It has to be April through May, and we can't look at data that's 3 years old. The
I
state
understand.
won't let us do that, so.
And if I may, one of the conversations we had in the field was whether or not an in-water survey was done, and Phil said he had not. He'd been out there at the right time of year, but not gotten into the water and looked for egg masses or dip netted for larvae or invertebrates or what have you. So those are that's the kind of data that you have to collect to conclude that something that looks like a vernal pool isn't. And by all measure, that looks like a vernal pool. From a physical standpoint, I don't have the benefit of seeing it in the right season. I think middle June or something was when we first went there, June 12th. So yeah, I don't have the benefit of seeing it at the right time of year. But if you don't go into the water, there's no real good chance that you're going to conclusively find that nothing is there. So in lieu of that, the way I read the bylaw is that there's a presumption until good evidence is presented that it's not. And I think that, given the lack of a in-water survey for indicators, it benefits by that presumption.
So if I may, as Matt just stipulated, he has been out during that time frame that you wanted over the last 8 years. Hindsight's 2020. I wish I had asked him to do an in-water study. I didn't know that was a thing to be done, so I never ask for it until you know. But having 36 years of experience, he knows, had he seen any as Matt would know, you know what you're looking for. Had he seen any evidence that it could be a vernal pool, that would have been something that would have been suggested to me, hey, look, this is a potential vernal pool. So he has been out during those times over the last 8 years. And
But the
he saw
data, it sounds like the way the data was collected was not sufficient, however.
what you're going backwards to ask for, it wasn't collected the way that you would want it, but what I'm
Right.
saying is he didn't note any evidence of it being a vernal pool, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
He
I
would
know,
have- he would
but
have
the
seen
thing
it.
is that you can't say there's no evidence if you haven't looked for the evidence. That's the
It's
problem that I
disproving,
have.
I understand what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
just, it's disproving something that isn't called into question until it's called into question, is all I'm saying. And so, had he seen it, he would have done it. So that's why I'm saying that, he didn't, there was no signs of it being a vernal pool. That's why no evidence was collected, or no data was collected.
Right, but Matt is saying there was physical evidence of a vernal pool.
It's a basin, so I guess any
Well,
basin
I
could
think
be.
it's more than just a basin. It has to have other things, right, Matt? You noticed buttresses and, were there other things that you noticed? The physical characteristics?
Oh, that's one of those things that I did look for aquatic invertebrate remains, that sort of thing that you sometimes find. But when you go to a pool that's dry, a lot of times you have to walk away saying, I don't know, maybe. Looking at it, the depth of water-stained leaves, the depth of the basin, the characteristics of the basin, its bank and the vegetation, or frankly, lack of vegetation. These things all speak volumes. And to me, I've seen an awful lot of pools off season, and I would, all things being equal, if I walked into something like that, I would flag it as a likely vernal pool and walk off and wait for spring if I had that luxury. I think where there's nothing on the table right now, your order could, if you issue an order, an ORAD, it could identify it as a likely vernal pool or presumptive vernal pool, pending, a springtime aquatic survey of, amphibian and invertebrate indicators. That might be one way to approach it.
Matt, to your experience, and Phil, to your experience, again, I'm deferring to my lack of knowledge. How long does evidence of biological, like remnants, like you said, eggs or things like that, how long do biological remnants of any kind of life remain after the whatever creatures have moved off? How long do they remain? Evidence of biological.
Yeah, so it's really an annual phenomenon for a lot of things. So as an example, when water comes back, in the fall or winter, we might expect fairy shrimp to hatch out, and be visible under the ice if it ices over. But they might be swimming late winter into early spring. They're usually gone by end of April into May or what have you. And then you'd find nothing of their presence after they're gone. Same sort of thing with frogs and salamanders. They come, they do their breeding, and once they leave, you're not going to see anything. There are. Yeah.
The reason I asked is that we did this, I know you said between, what was it, April and May? We came out in early June, and I understand that's not between April and May, but it's pretty darn close. And I mean, the difference of a week or two, and we would be in that zone. So that's all I'm saying, is it's so close to that time frame. And I understand what you're saying, but to keep pushing it forward just on the assumptions. anyways, all right, I apologize.
If we can just, I took a little time while we were talking, and did the math, for the dominance test based on, one of the scans for, plot AB East, which had 2 pages, including tree, shrub, herb, and, vine stratum. And by my math, so the way that the dominance test works is you add up the cumulative percent cover for a stratum, and then you divide the individual percent cover for each species by the total. So as an example, the tree stratum, we have red maple, red oak, quaking aspen, cedar. And we had a total of 91% tree cover. 50 plus 30 plus 6 plus 5. Take that 91 and you divide each one. So you divide 50 by 91, 30 by 91, 6 by 91, and 5 by 91. And then any plant that is 50% or more is dominant. And then we also include plants that are 20% or more. And so in the tree stratum, we had red maple and red oak, which meet the dominance test. In the shrub stratum, we had only glossy buckthorn meeting the dominance test. In the herb stratum, we had poison ivy and bittersweet that met the 50% or more, or 20% or more. And in the vine stratum, we had foxglove, and the other vine was also. And by my count, we had 1, 2, 3 facultative, and 3. No, see, I got to check this. Anyway, this is why I wanted to do the have a chance to do the math, because I think by this measure, the we hit 50% facultative coverage of that plot that was presented. So anyway, you know, I think that you should take the opportunity to do that math and check it correctly in making that decision. But anyway.
Yeah.
I too said I think you ought to take a minute to be able to run those numbers and make sure that by that measure you're comfortable with it. The determination.
I agree with you, Matthew.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I agree with what Matt just said, but I want to make sure we're all using apples and oranges and things where we should. The form that the state gives you asks for absolute percent cover, but it doesn't give you a column to put in the cover ranges and the midpoint of each range. My understanding is that you make a note of your absolute percent cover. That's the raw data you get from the field. Then you take the table on page B4 of the Appendix B, and you put that percentage in and determine which range to use and what the midpoint is of the range, and it is the midpoints of those different ranges for all of the plants that you listed that you add up. I'll give you the actual math for my tree layer, and what it is if I may finish, Matt, I'm sorry to, but I just want to be very clear, and if I'm wrong, God will convict me. The red oak, the percentage cover I saw was 30%. The midpoint of the 30% range is 20.5. Not 20, no, I'm sorry, it's 25%, it's 25. The midpoint of the Red Oak Range is 28. The red maple midpoint was 53. There's more red maple there. And if you add up the other things which are listed, the poplar, the percent dominant comes out to 15, and the red cedar comes out to 4. They're both less than 20. But you add up all those midpoints, you get 72. The red oak, 20.5 divided by 72 is 28. I mean, it's important to do the math the same way. And if I'm wrong about using the midpoints of the ranges, please tell me.
No, I'm in agreement with you. I'm just saying that this came in yesterday and I haven't had an opportunity to run the numbers to verify it. And so that's all I'm saying. It would be good to have that opportunity.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're not even questioning the species that you found, but do we agree with the math? That's all.
You're welcome to my raw data if you like. Thank you.
Matthew, do you want to look at those numbers while we can go over, like Rich was saying, go on to the bridge project, and you can look at those numbers and come back, revisit this before we do 0 Summer Street?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll turn off my camera and pull out a pencil.
Does that work for everybody? Somebody want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion, we reconvene on this agenda item till after
After,
0 Summer.
no, after the.
I'm sorry,
The bridge?
Yeah.
after the bridge, after
I'll second that.
Center Ave.
All those in favor? Aye. Gene?
Aye, aye,
Okay.
aye, aye.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
I just lost my agenda.
Just gonna say, good secretary would have another one for you.
All right,
She
next
just threw it in
up,
front of
SE
you.
084-566, notice of intent located at Center Ave.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Masner. I work with TC, the engineering firm that's working with the town on this project. I think since the last meeting, we had a site walk, and the main area of concern was this upland restoration area. So you should have our revised seeding and planting plan,
Yeah.
kind of showing what our wetland scientists recommended we put in there.
This is one right here. It looks like from our site walk, right, it's just a really small little area. Very small. It's just covered with, lots of poison ivy. Gene, you remember everything that's there? Okay. And so we had a discussion about putting in wetland replication mix, and also we had high bush blueberry, a bunch of those. And then I saw there were some other things on here, sensitive fern and conservation mix. So another thing that we, kind of popped up in our head was we noticed the proximity of a house next door, and our concern was that somebody would be able to easily come in and, see all this and go, yay, what's this? And come in and kind of destroy the area. So we were thinking about maybe there'd be some sort of physical barrier where, workers could come in, but if for the most part the public would be excluded from the area.
And we added that call out also to that NOI
Yeah.
plan. And something we'll integrate into our specifications as well, like contractors shall have some sort of equivalent fence, signage of the sort that we will approve and say,
Right.
that will restrict access to the site.
Yeah, because typically we have not a do not enter, but,
Polite, don't step here.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Construction zone.
Or, yeah, the Abington Conservation Commission area or something like that. I know, Jean, you had mentioned we're concerned about certain group of people in town.
Yeah, yeah. We all know that, the Grove is a notorious place for young adults to hang out, and they're drawn to the water. So my concerns were that we have some sort of barrier, like, again, I apologize because the volume, you guys are not coming across very clear, even though you're speaking directly into the microphone. I don't know what the problem is, but it's been a challenge trying to listen in on this meeting, and I've logged out and logged in twice. So, yeah, it's just trying to keep the young ones out of there to give the plants that Lynn just mentioned a chance to grow and fill in, because they are notorious down in that area. There's a lot of kids along. There's a house right beside the area, and then there's another house up from there that has a bunch of kids too. So, and I'm not saying it's them, but I'm just saying kids are drawn to water and plants, and let's go down there and hang out. That's all.
It's a beautiful area, but we certainly want to minimize the traffic through the new plantings, so.
Absolutely. And on the other side of it is where Spencer's Pizza is, so everybody knows that area. So, kids, we were all kids once. But I was pleased when I read the review and the update. Thank you.
Same. Made it look good. So was there anything else we wanted to discuss about this project?
What kind of restrictions are you gonna add as far as the fencing and things like that?
Or open suggestions. I mean, I think the general thing was just a high chain link fence would be the idea. I feel like that should be sufficient to keep most of them out. We're kind of connecting on this plan to this like retaining wall treat area, so that should be kind of difficult to access beyond that, you know. I figure like signage also like on the chain link fence, you know, on behalf of the town, keep out, that type of thing, if that would be sufficient. Or again, we're open to suggestions if you have other things in mind.
I think were we working on some standardized verbiage for that? That we should probably utilize?
Yeah, I think we have standardized, we're trying to make it like the Abington colors, and
Okay.
I think it,
Yeah.
sign.
It's on the webpage
Yeah.
with the side in it.
I believe we did already vote on that, the signage and the verbiage and the size and things of that nature, so.
Mhm.
So you could just refer to that.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, that'll be written to our specs, so we can say the contractor shall coordinate with Conservation Commission on specific signage on that, if that works.
Okay.
Signage for what? Sorry.
So our concern
Supposed to be at work right
was-
now.
Our concern was noticing on the site walk that there's a home right next door to the area.
Yep.
And we're concerned that people are gonna wanna come in to that restoration area.
Oh, yeah, like we did with
Yeah,
Zero Hancock.
yeah, exactly. So they said, you know, they're willing to put signs wherever we want, or other sorts of barriers or something.
Well, I think the barriers are gonna be the biggest deterrent.
Yeah, so it's a matter of figuring out.
Just don't cut down all the poison ivy, that'll be a good. That'll keep me out of
A
it.
natural deterrent.
Well, there's poison ivy on the bridge, right?
creeping
On the
up,
chain
yeah.
link thing right there. It's like, oh, stay away.
Just have to look at it and I get it, so.
Mm. It's like 75% of the population is allergic to poison ivy.
And it gets worse as you get older.
Mhm.
You guys talk about the seating and everything? Okay.
So what they're gonna do is they're gonna put in wild wetland
Conservation seed mix.
high bush blueberries, and sensitive ferns. And they mentioned there in the plan that, you know, if they can't get them, they'd get something else. But we do ask that you come to us
Yep.
before you make any determinations
Of course.
for that. And this will be done after construction is complete, right?
Correct,
It
yeah.
doesn't make sense to do it
Mhm.
before, okay, that's what I thought. Usually we have a whole 63, 69
Orders,
orders.
special orders?
Special orders for replication, which we can, share with you.
Gotcha.
Well, we should go through them because there might be some that
Don't work for
won't
this
work with this one,
project.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, the plan is to divert all the flow to the spillway, right?
Correct, yep.
You're gonna sandbag, make a sandbag coffer dam around
Mm-hmm.
the inlet. Can you just, because I know whoever bids on the job, whoever's awarded the job, their means and methods are gonna be what they're gonna use. They may wanna use something different than sandbag. Can you just have whoever's awarded the contract, once they submit the plan to you guys, just, we can see it and acknowledge it.
Yeah,
We're not gonna approve it, but.
yeah, of course. We'll send it over.
acknowledge it.
Yep.
And when are you guys thinking this is gonna go out to bid?
So, as soon as possible would be ideal, obviously. The biggest hiccup is the small bridge application for this, which we're still waiting to hear back from, see if they actually got awarded this. So we should be hearing ideally this month is what
Yep.
we're thinking. If they don't receive that, then this project isn't gonna happen for another year or so.
Yep.
So I believe the process would be award the grant and then put out to bid soon after that.
Well, hopefully next year it's not as wet as this year is. Gene, do you have anything? Oh, Jim's waiting to enter the room again.
I'm good, thank you.
I'm afraid every time. Anybody have anything else?
No?
Anybody in the audience? Somebody want to make a motion to approve or deny, or?
I'll make a motion to approve SE 84 566, notice of intent located at Center Ave.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Jean? Unanimous?
Bye.
All right.
All right.
Great, thank you
Thank
guys.
you very much.
I think this is yours, right?
Yeah. No, the top one was mine. Yours was, you had the seed one. Matthew, are you ready?
Yeah, you're cruel.
I
Math was never one of my favorites.
remember you saying that at the last meeting.
So, according to the dominance test,
Let me just, Matthew, hold, let me just reopen the hearing. Somebody want to make a motion to open up?
I'll make a motion that we open up and continue 161 North Quincy Street.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous?
Bye.
I bought you another minute, Matt.
I didn't do anything productive with that. Okay, so according to Phil, so Phil's math checks out for the AB East if we use the dominance test. And that's typically where we stop. In the handbook, it says that on rare occasions when results of a dominance test are inconsistent with evidence from soils and or other indicators of hydrology, the prevalence index should be used to determine whether the plant community is wetland or non-wetland. I don't have time to run that because that's more complicated. So, on the face of it, I'm in agreement with Phil's conclusions relative to the dominance test in the data form that was presented for AB East. you know, that may be enough for you to go on. It would take me a bit longer to run the prevalence index. This is a case where that would be appropriate because we did have the soil indicators and evidence of surface hydrology. But you know, that would, I'm not gonna do that tonight under the gun. So, you know, I think I'd, at this point, I'd leave it to you. You know, I would recommend that you take the minute and get that right. So that's not appealed and you know, pushed one way or the other. But you know, I certainly appreciate the sense of how long it's taken to get to this point. So you know, I kind of leave that to your better senses.
Thank you.
I have to say, I agree, only because I don't feel like working under that kind of pressure, any good things come out of it. I want to be absolutely sure what's good for the property, the builder, Mr. Zachary, for conservation. I want to be able to go, yep, I made the best decision. I want to listen to my peer reviewer. I'm not going to put them under this kind of pressure. That's unfair. That's unfair. That's my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I just want to make a motion,
How-
to be honest with you. Things just taking,
I agree with you.
It's dragging on.
I mean, I want to be able to have a vote that I'm proud of, that I truly feel like I do know the answer to this, and I really believe it. And I don't have that here. I mean, Matthew mentioned calculation we could do. He has the data. It sounds like it's the only piece that we need left in this puzzle.
And he's already checked out this and everything checked out fine. You know,
Yeah,
it's
but
just,
like he
we keep
mentioned-
pushing it back and then we push it back. The next meeting, it's gonna be something else and we're gonna be here till,
Well, no, and he mentioned that when you have this situation, and then you have two other pieces of evidence that don't fit, you're supposed to do the prevalence test, and then you're done.
But the evidence that was given based on the studies that were conducted check out, and I feel like we have a due diligence to the owner as well. The vernal pool situation, I know we talked about the banks and things like that. Half of those banks on those areas that would look like were man-made in my eyes, and I'm not an expert to either of the experts before us, but
But our peer reviewer also brought up the soil, and he came with us with hydric soils compared to the Munsell chart. You know, soils tell the story.
Actually, one of the things in the binder that, you know, Tony, you made this huge effort with all those slides from the meetings that you went to, and there are pictures of vernal pools from a presentation that Matt actually gave that show vernal pools that look very much like these pictures. And you can have a man-made depression that begins to act like a wetland.
and I also think any man-made depression, and there's many man-made depressions on that lot as well as adjacent lots, that if left untouched could turn into a vernal pool in the proper season and the proper conditions.
we voted on some like that on other, we've approved them on other projects.
I'll make a motion that we move forward on the ORAD for 161.
NRAD.
NRAD, I'm sorry, on 161 North Quincy Street.
I'm gonna second that.
To, what's the motion, to approve, deny?
Approve the,
approve.
approve the notice of resource area delineation.
All those in favor? Well, you wanna do a roll call since Jean's, Jean, you go first.
No,
Right down there, Alex.
I approve.
I approve.
No?
I approve. So 3-2, ayes have it. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the commission. I know you're on your own time, and I've taken up a lot of your time, so thank you so much for your time. Have a good night, guys.
You too. All right, next up is SE 084-563, notice of intent located at 0 Summer Street. I don't know if you guys, can you guys sit at the table, just having a hard time hearing on that microphone?
Can we get them another mic so that they can both sit there?
Oh, it's going to be.
You want to do
Okay, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it, thank you.
the next meeting?
Yeah.
You're gonna go through the replication stuff and... Redo the whole shared replication thing with more stuff in there so we can just... The table is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, as a reminder, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, joined by Mark Seck from WP East Acquisitions, obviously to resume the notice of intent discussion for 0 Summer Street. When we left you a couple of weeks ago, we had presented the response to comments to your peer reviewers' comments. I think we got through by discussion a lot of the meatier comments. We left a few stragglers at the end that we're hoping we can make some forward progress and sort of get the commission's flavor on those comments tonight, having given you the chance hopefully to review the letter in greater detail. So that was agenda item number 1. Agenda item number 2 is we had agreed that BSC Group was going to put together a cost estimate to do a stormwater peer review, sort of a double, triple gut check to what was done under the Zoning Board of Appeals. We wanted to revisit that. We haven't seen any correspondence related to those matters, so we thought we'd bring it back in front of the commission tonight. And then lastly, because our discussion last meeting was largely focused on buffer zone disturbance in terms of what we were trying to construct within the buffer zone for the stormwater basin, the commission had asked us to share some examples of prior projects that had done very similar activities in close proximity. So first, let me start by saying, so I'm going to address that one first, and we can go through the other ones.
Can we pause for just 1 second?
Of course.
Gene, how are you hearing everybody, all right?
I'm hearing
Okay.
better. I'm hearing much better this time around. I don't know what it was about the last.
Okay, the Board of Selectmen meeting was difficult the last meeting I watched too, so just want to make sure everybody can hear it. Thank you.
I have a loud projecting voice. She might be able to hear me at home without the microphone. Can you see my hands move? It's Italian discussion too. So our examples regarding the buffer zone. So first, let me apologize in that we electronically transmitted information through your staff this afternoon to hopefully get to, more importantly, your peer reviewer. But I have printed examples here tonight that I'd like to hand out to the commission. I understand, you're going to be seeing it for the first time. I'm going to talk you through what I'm providing, but hopefully it can just further our conversation, if allowable, to hand that out to you all tonight. Okay.
Yep.
So we brought 3 case studies. I know you were asking for a few, right? And, we'll try to draw to the parallels that there are, but knowing that, as we discussed, every site is kind of unique.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just didn't hear what that gentleman just said because he doesn't have a mic. So that's a problem. That's a problem when you're remote. Sorry.
Gene, he's passing out these examples, and we're going to try to talk through them and get as close to apples as we can.
What are these? We don't have the benefit of having these, so, okay. Okay.
Matt, do you have these?
They came through this afternoon, so I do have some documents. So I'll try to follow along.
Yeah, this isn't going to be easy for me either.
Yeah, it might be worth just holding off on this until
Yeah.
So
Phil. I mean, if you want, we can look at them real
let me
quick.
give you the overview.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
about that?
yep.
And, I understand well, let me say that with the microphone. So just to address that point, so let me say, we get that. We obviously have to do the stormwater peer review. We're coming back to you for at least one more meeting, hopefully. So we understand we can table some of this discussion for that point. So to allow your commissioner member who is virtual tonight, obviously allow Matthew to review it in greater detail. But the high altitude review is what I've put in front of the commission, and it was submitted electronically today, is I've provided 3 projects for the commission to look at, and they each represent, oh, you have the third one there. Right. So I've provided 3 compatible projects, and just to walk you through what the projects are. So graphically for the board, there is one with a very large TAT border. This is a multi-family project that we constructed with a different developer, he's aware of this, in the town of Rentham. Multi-family, multi-story building. And the reason I'm sharing this imagery with the commission tonight is one of the comments that we had was with regard to the steep slopes that are potentially constructed adjacent to the wetlands. And we're providing this is a representative plan of what's built. It's out there now, it's a visitable site. And then on the back side of it is just some aerial imagery showing you the slopes that are constructed behind the building. They're very steep slopes, 30 to 40 feet. They're riprap reinforced, but they are directly wetland resource area adjacent. And while I understand these are not micro photographs when Matthew and Jean take a look at them, these are obviously high altitude, but you'll be able to see that the health of the wetland, at least visually, remained in place as a result of this project. So we can talk through that one in greater detail.
Oh, this is right off of Route 1, right?
It is right off of Route 1. Right at 495, there's a big American flag there. If you want to go see it, we can shepherd that.
I see it every day.
There you go. Perfect. The second example that I'll give you, a multi-page document, multi-family building. It's along West Central Street. This is a project that Mark and I actually did together. It is a W East Acquisitions project. This is in the town of Franklin. Again, 3 buildings, multi-story, very akin to what we're doing here or requesting permission to do here in Abington. And what you'll notice on the multiple sheets, we have wetlands that surround the site. We have resource area. And we have been able to successfully construct this project in very, very close proximity, not only to have parking areas, but stormwater retention areas, grading and slopes. And what I've endeavored to do for the commission is to just give you a general key. So on each of the plans is a gray box that says photo 1 through 20, and right behind it are the representative photos of that area. And at the commission's direction, whether it's this meeting or the next one, I can talk through exactly what you're seeing in each one of these photographs. But rest assured, the general statement is that within each one of those photographs is a resource area, and it shows how closely we were able to construct within adjacency to that resource area and preserve the resource area, which is the goal here. Meaning that we eliminated the buffer and we were able to successfully preserve the resource area, which is really the substance of our discussion that we talked about at the last meeting.
May I interrupt you for a minute?
Please.
This project in Franklin, so you were directly right up to the BBWs. There was no buffer at all.
So we had some buffer area, Gene. We had between 20 and 25 feet, which was a local buffer. We maintained as much buffer as we could, but the takeaway messaging is the removal of 25 to 100 feet. That's 75 feet of buffer zone that's not defined as a resource area under the Act. That's what I would draw your attention to that we removed in this circumstance.
Right. So looking at 0 Summer Street and where that parking lot is next to the pond, what's the width between the parking lot and the pond? I'm sorry, I can't put my maps in front of me because I don't have the room right here right now, but that's...
No problem. So your ask, so for the commission to confirm, Gene, you're asking the distance from the parking to the existing pond on site, correct?
Yeah.
So yep, so that distance plus or minus would be probably about 30 feet from the edge of our parking area here to the entry point of that pond. I'm approximating it, but it's about 30 feet. You know, it's the width, the depth of a parking space plus a few extra feet. Okay?
Thank you.
Certainly. And then the third project, again, this is a large multi-family project, but they're based on single-family homes. This, again, is a multi-sheet project. This is located in the town of Middleborough, done with a different developer. And what I've done here is I have large stormwater basins close to our wetland resource areas. So all of the photographs that I provided to you depict how we constructed up to 25 feet to the wetland resource area on this plan as well, for the purposes of installing stormwater management basins and preserve the wetlands that were around it. And in one of the wetland resource areas, we actually have a potential vernal pool that we protected as well. We don't have that here in Abington, but we did have it on that site. So the three examples were selected to illustrate stormwater management within proximity to the basin as replacement for buffer, sloping and grading within the buffer zone in close proximity to the wetland resource area, and then there's just general grading activity, parking, and other site infrastructure in close proximity. So I'm here to talk through all of the imagery, again, respecting that you're just seeing it for the first time and maybe reacting to it. So I'll defer to the commission in terms of how much you would like me to elaborate now, or take a moment to digest it and we'll go from there.
Maybe we should let Matt look at it first, get his comments, and then when you guys come back to the next meeting.
Yeah, we were in town, quite honestly. We wanted to make sure we were here in front of you. We wanted to share this information. Again, apologies, it's last minute. But in our opinion, these examples, we went through a lot. We're as close to apples as we could make for you, recognizing it's not exactly perfect. Okay.
I agree with Paul. I just want to know, Matt, are these photographs sufficient? Is this what you were thinking of when you wanted this information?
It is definitely a good collection of things to look at and digest. I'd be curious of I'm sure I could dissect it from your as-built, but when these were built, when they were constructed, kind of how long they've been in place.
Yeah, we can get answers to that. The dates are on the plans, quite frankly, representing the as-built. I can get them for you in exactness. So, but all of these have been functioning for years at this point. So none of these are construction sites. None of these we're waiting for stabilization. These are all fully occupied, fully built out. We've stepped away from the project for a number of years.
And haven't significantly deteriorated.
Have not, they all have standing certificates of completion from their respective Concom, so they passed the sniff test at the close of construction. We've gotten no calls, no indication of any deterioration, no loss of vegetation, nothing of the sort. So, and I will tell you, the three examples that I gave, I as an engineer, I'm still actively involved with these developers on different projects. So if any one of these were suffering in any way, I will attest to you my phone would be ringing, and that is not the case for those. So I'll just give you sort of my professional statement on those. Okay.
Thank you for the effort.
Sure.
Matt, are you going to need physical copies? Do you want physical copies sent to you?
I think at least at first blush, this should be a good set of materials to work from.
We'll get Matt whatever he needs. So Matt, if you change your mind, let us know.
Appreciate that. Okay.
So I guess the next lowest hanging fruit is maybe an update from the commission side as to where we stand on the stormwater peer review. I know the commission was working through BSC to develop that process. We don't know where we are at with that.
I'll speak on behalf of the commission, I guess. I bumped into Dom this morning. It's on his radar, but he doesn't have a proposal together. So I'll continue to browbeat him and get that to you as soon as possible.
Recognizing that was the likely answer, obviously, one of the things that we'd like to talk to the commission about, and when we continue this hearing tonight, we're going to continue, obviously, to the next available. We want to keep staying with you and keep discussing these topics. So as part of that stormwater peer review is, can we get a proposal, agree on a proposal, and get them engaged, that we can have a meaningful conversation from them for the next meeting. Matt, sorry to put you on the spot, but that would be the ask of BSC Group, of course.
Yeah, I'll get a little smacky with him, trying to get that squared away for you. I know that we shouldn't. Yeah, I will do my best to move that forward.
So then turning to the third thing that we had as open items from the last meeting, just to jump in, the response to comments letter that Allen and Major had prepared as a response to BSC Group. I think we made it through comment/response 6, because that was all stormwater buffer related. So comments 7 through 13 were general note-based comments that we responded to. Your peer reviewer was recommending certain things. We replied in kind. To the commission's preference, we can walk through each one of those. Hopefully at this point you've had a chance to review them. But obviously we'd love to start resolving some of these issues with you tonight if we can. And if that means walking through each one, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I might as well. I mean, I don't think we're going to be here for an hour and a half like last time for the first
I don't think so either, Mr. Chair. So we'll go very quick.
Knock on wood.
Okay. So just reading from the letter, paraphrasing, comment 7, BSC recommends the use of silt fence and hay bales to maximize protection of adjacent wetland resource areas, especially where there's little to no buffer. Our response to that, we of course agree. We have an erosion control plan. We'll provide silt fence and appropriate barriers. What I was suggesting through my response to the commission is Matt had recommended the use of hay bales. We are asking for permission to consider other than hay bale for obvious reasons about using straw bales as opposed to mulch logs or other more amenable products associated with wetland resource areas. Would Matt or the commission have issue with that?
Yeah, we don't even approve hay bales anymore. It's either
Right.
straw bales or compost tubes.
Yeah, okay, so that seems like we're just correcting maybe Matt, sorry Matt, again, just correcting the use of hay bale.
I admit to not being an erosion control expert, so.
Okay, so we'll do the right thing. It's actually already specified on the erosion plans. We just wanted to make sure we check the box with your reviewer. Comment 8, BSC recommends the limit of work boundary be moved up gradient to the maximum extent feasible to avoid unpermitted construction phase impacts to BVW, and then it goes on with some documentation. We agree. It's the intent of the limit of work on the development drawings to maintain as much separation as possible. The plans that you have in front of you with those distances that I just referenced for Gene obviously are what we anticipate needing. Our goal would be to pull that work as far away as possible. And what I'm asking through the commission, if you're willing to consider it as part of the order, is that you would send out somebody from the commission, maybe it's Matthew, to review the erosion line once we have it in place, and we'll show to you how we were able to maximize that distance that is of concern through the peer review or through the commission adjacent to those wetland resource areas. So the minimum would be what we have on the plan. But once you're on site and you start laying things out, you can see, ways to maybe maximize that as much as possible. So we're establishing for you a commitment to do that, but to do it when we can get out there on the site when it has most meaning.
Makes sense. Phil, one thing,
Yep.
where the erosion control is going to be very close to the wetlands. I'd like to see, so you're going to put your hay bales, compost tube, whatever first, then the silt fence will be behind that. I'd like to see where you're, in areas where you're very close, to put like a row of orange snow fence, just more as for the people doing the work, they know where it goes beyond this point. I've had it on projects I've built. It's just an extra buffer
Okay.
for protection. I'm not saying you don't have to do the whole perimeter, just in areas where it's very close.
Okay. So,
What are we defining as very close?
so yeah, if we could, I mean, maybe we'll talk about it for half a second. Is the
Yeah.
sensitivity
Just
the
that.
pond?
Right, that area, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds fine. That sounds fine. I mean, obviously, it is an open water body, so it certainly doesn't hurt to have, high vis protection. Okay. Okay. Comment 9, BSC recommends that a third-party construction monitor be engaged to evaluate said installed erosion control measures prior to work. Obviously, then it goes on a little bit about weekly construction event, weekly inspections and after storm events. So our response, the applicant anticipates the erosion control measures will require inspection as noted in response 8. And if the commission wants a monitor, we can certainly talk about that. So we agree with the initial inspection. I just offered that up a minute ago. It's in the betterment of where we put things. But in terms of an ongoing weekly inspection, we're going to have the responsibility of a weekly inspection under the SWIP program. This gets a NEPDES permit. So our weekly inspector for that will be on-site personnel. We're required to keep those records on-site. If the commission desires or will allow us to perform under that, those auspices, we can make sure that copies of those records get to you as well. And then at any point the commission wants to conduct an inspection on site, so be it. I guess what I'm suggesting, said more simply, is let's engage the third party, presumably it's Matthew, to do the initial inspection, but maybe you can leave the weekly inspections to our control and we can provide reports to you throughout the length of construction.
The SWIP, are you gonna do it, because can't you do it every 2 weeks, and then any rain event more than half an inch, it's a quarter inch or half an inch of rain, you have to do one within 24 hours? Or you
That's
can-
correct.
Or you can do it once a week.
Right, so we do it weekly, or if we get that rainfall
Yep.
trigger, which is the half inch, so minimum is once a week. If it rains a lot like it has yesterday, today, tomorrow, you get more inspections.
So I know it.
Matt, what do you think of that?
That's really to the commission's discretion. My experience, which I'm going to admit is relatively limited. We've been involved with several large projects that where we're doing ongoing monitoring, and regardless the fact that the project is responsible for SWIP inspections, we always find that we've got a running list of issues that need to be addressed week in and week out. They're just things that don't bubble up to the top of the priority list with a busy construction site. And it's been my experience that having that third party watching and pressing to get the wetland resource protection squared away when storms knock down fences and overwhelm hay bales, straw bales, all that. It's unfortunately it tends to be something that's necessary, but it is redundant. But it's a sort of the benefit to the Conservation Commission to have eyes that are dedicated to your interests on site every week.
So what I'm doing right now, I'm working on a project up on the North Shore, and I'm acting as, I do the inspections every 2 weeks or whenever we get a rain event. And instead of having a third party, what the town does is once a month, they have somebody come out and they have a third party inspection once a month, make sure I've done all my paperwork, make sure if there's a rain event, I have all the documentation. So it's not every week or every 2 weeks, but once a month.
So would it be reasonable for a member of the commission once a month go collect that documentation, visualize what's going on, and report back to the board with that documentation?
I don't think anyone on our commission is really qualified, maybe Paul. because he's in that field. I mean, no offense to anybody, but I know I've gone out to a site and overlooked something because, I mean, I didn't know that storm drains could have bags in it to collect debris and stuff. So, you know, again, my concern is I don't want anything to get overlooked on the conservation end of it. I want something that's dedicated to the interest of protecting, you know, that area there, because we are working in very, very, very tight quarters. I mean, there's very little room for, you know, if something were to happen. I mean, they're right in BBWs. My opinion.
And Paul, I mean, he's got a job and does other
Yeah,
things.
I'm supposed to be at it right now, actually.
Yeah. So we don't want to put everything on him. And I agree with Jean, he's the most qualified person to look this over, but
There's a class you can take for 8 hours and get certified too. For the people that have taken their, you're all up to date on MACC.
Yeah, to Paul's point, you know, a monthly inspection might be adequate from a qualified person that knows what they're looking at, you know, and assuming that things are going swimmingly, you know, you just kind of let that ride. But if things are going downhill, if the erosion controls are, you know, not being repaired in a timely manner, you might increase the frequency or what have you. You might kind of approach it that way. But, you know, I think Paul's experience is instructive and certainly appropriate if things are going well.
And that's all stuff that's in the SWIP, so if you, presumably if they go out there the first month, you know, they've been out there a month, we do the first inspection, and I look at the reports and they say all the hay bale or all the erosion controls in fine order, and you see compost tubes all ripped up, silt fence laying down, that's gonna say, well, they haven't been doing their reports accurately, they're just filling out the report and filing it away. Not you guys, but just in general.
People.
And then you say, okay, well, instead of doing it once a month, we'll do it more frequently. Or you go out there 6 months into the project, and all the paperwork's good, all the erosion control's good, then maybe you do it once every month and a half. I mean, I'll do it, and I can take somebody else out from the commission, so if I can't do it, it's not rocket science. It's not. That's how I get certified, because if it was rocket science, I wouldn't have my certification.
Mr. Chair, if I could just to weigh in, a 30-second speech, just to remind the commission, so the developer is also the general contractor and the builder here. So it's not a standard site where he's the developer and it gets turned over. They remain the entirety of the time. They're fully responsible the entirety of the time. We remain connected the entirety of the time. I'm not suggesting to at all say you don't need to go out ever, but I am suggesting that the group that's discussing these matters with you is connected throughout the life of the project.
Yeah.
You know, so we can give you that, hopefully can give you that sense of reliability and that the upkeep of the site and that things are not in disrepair.
No, because I mean, if we approve it, one of the conditions is going to be that we can do, you know, inspections. Not even me, anybody in the commission can go out there and do an inspection if they see something wrong.
Sure.
It's going to have to get fixed.
We expect
so,
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think while the commission's deliberating, is maybe slide in response 10, which is very similar. Response 10 is to Matt's suggestion about enforcing whatever conditions, should the commission issue an order, to make sure somebody's checking up on us on that as well. You know, so as you decide on number 9, 10 is sort of the same thing.
I'm fine with us looking at it, but I would like to have the opportunity, if we feel like we can't oversee it, that we could have somebody else oversee it. But I mean, if I'm out there looking at the erosion control, I should be able to look at the other conditions to make sure they're being followed. Or any of us can do that. When we're the ones writing the conditions, we should be able to
Monitor them.
make sure they're being followed. And again, you know, if it's approved, we're gonna have to have good communication between you guys and us to make sure that we can, you know, if there's a specific milestone, when you're doing the erosion control, when you're doing the tree clearing, that we can, I don't wanna get a phone call on Tuesday afternoon, we're gonna be clearing trees on Wednesday morning. Give us as much notice as you guys can, that way we can plan somebody to be out there if we wanna be out there to see whatever task it is.
So what you'll find, working with these folks for as long as I have, their reputation, of course, precedes them, but as the project advances, you'll see our faces a lot. And the first thing that we'll endeavor to do is we'll hold a meeting with all of the on-site technical staff, primarily building department, but building, fire, electrical, plumbing, conservation, planning, zoning board. We all sit at a big table just like this, and we'll walk you through the plan set. And at that time, we will have a schedule that's this thick, and anything that you want will be in there. It's continually updated, so we have no problem, obviously, giving all that information. It'll come no matter, whether you ask for it or not,
Yep.
you're gonna get it. Okay. Comment 11. BSC recommends referencing the Wild Seed Project or the Native Plant Trust for native flowering trees to increase diversity and value to wildlife species. So our response, we'll look into it, we agree with it. We're asking, does the commission agree with your consultant? Is that what you would like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will integrate that in. 12 is largely the same, only stated around tree planting lists. So we've obviously given a full list certified by our landscape architect. BSC is recommending a little more diversity there. So again, because it's just a recommendation, I'm asking the commission, is that what you would want? Do we need to walk through the tree palette that's selected and get the feedback from the commission? Or can we work through generating diversity as part of the final planting plan? So it's confirming your intent relative to your consultant's recommendation.
I agree with our consultant. More diversity, more canopy.
So if I may, through the chair, we did go through this plan at length with the fire chief, and he did have some reservations about a fuller canopy and potentially life safety
Yeah,
and
there-
access issues. So
That was at one of the zoning board
well, I
meetings, right?
acknowledge that. I think there is going to be a balance where we can't have, bigger canopy. That would be, we would desire that as well. But again, the fire chief wanted lower plantings as it may conflict with the ladder swing.
You have to talk up more. She can't. I don't
So
think
this
it
is in
works.
regards to that recommendation about a fuller canopy and potential tree coverage. We had met with the fire chief, Chief Nuttall, and he had strong reservations against higher, kind of fuller canopy trees in preference for smaller shade trees, as it may conflict with the ladder swing on his fire apparatus. So while this is a recommendation, he had life safety concerns, and so we feel that we probably have to abide by his discretion there on the trees.
But is that, when we're talking about increasing the canopy, are we talking about increasing it all over the property? Or can we increase it, let's say, in parking lots, for example?
Well, I think maybe we can ask Matthew for a clarification as to what he intended when he made the comment, whether he was referring to the entirety of the site or the jurisdictional area of the commission, which is much more constrained. But then even within that area, then to Mark's point, we have some limitations based on the fire chief's requirements for areas pointing to the plan, along this corridor because of the needs to fight a fire, which obviously is within the buffer zone to the BBW on the west part of the site. So we do have that push and pull.
Yeah, and there are realities that you're going to have to deal with that, an ecologist can give a opinion as to the best approach to something, but realities often are hard to deal with for ecologists. That said, you'll have an overall planting plan for the site. Yes, a lot of the planting plan is going to occur in places that are outside of jurisdiction, but you're making a lot of impact. You're proposing a lot of impact within jurisdiction. And so I think whatever planting is done can take into consideration climate resiliency and ecological function, and just try to make a better built environment at the end of the day through consideration of plant species selection and so forth. So it's really just an opportunity to say, you're going to do a lot of planting. Let's make it not necessarily just pretty, but let's make it get some ecological function and some climate resiliency and other sort of ancillary benefit. I think that's the intent behind those last couple of comments.
Yeah, we agree that we're going to take that into consideration as best as possible.
That's it. That's through 13. We did it.
The red oak.
So I'm sorry, I interpreted Matt's sort of summary statement there to absorb 13 as well, which is, he's recommending that the red oak maybe be substituted with scarlet oak, American linden, which have the pollinator benefits, which I read as the ecological functions that he was referencing. So again, if the commission, sounds like you would want that, we're amenable to working through those changes where we can. I guess we should just talk about how that manifests itself. Under our ZBA permit application, we did provide a landscaping plan. We are required to provide back to them the final construction plans, which will include the detailed landscaping plan, to which all of these comments can be embedded in that, and that plan will obviously come back to the commission as part of that process to make sure that we've done what we said we're going to do, if the commission agrees.
We definitely don't want big trees in front of that building.
No.
100%.
I'll defer to the firefighters on the board.
We can put them, but then you're gonna have stumps in front of that building.
Exactly.
He's already said he's gonna cut them.
Which takes critical time and effort, so.
He didn't say exactly that, so if he's watching, I'm paraphrasing.
Anybody have anything else?
That's our agenda, commission, so obviously we're here to answer any further questions that have come up, any thoughts that have transpired in the last meeting.
The question is, who I can have get certified to be a stormwater inspector? Other than me.
Did Jean raise her hand? I can't see.
That's right.
Yeah, I think Jean did, yeah.
Mute Gene's
We
like.
can make a motion.
Which you probably can't hear me right now, I'm so far away from the microphone too.
Jean, can you hear us?
I'm going to tell you, this has probably been the most frustrating Zoom meeting I have ever been on. I mean, this audio system is just terrible. I mean,
I said I'm gonna mute you and then I'm gonna nominate you to get stormwater certified.
yeah.
Oh, she said yes. All
All those in favor?
Yeah. How about Rich? Rich can do it. No, I'm sorry. I don't know how Matthew is hearing everything, but it sounds like everything is underwater. This is supposed to be a new upgraded sound system, audio system, and it's terrible. I'd go back to 2022 and use whatever we had back then, because this has just been the worst Zoom meeting as far as audio goes. So, I apologize. It's just that I'm not hearing it, and I'm trying to keep my microphone on so I can listen and talk, but it's like, I'm like, I can't hear Can't hear.
It's very frustrating. when
We hear you
can't
crystal
hear.
clear.
Yeah.
I bet you do.
Anybody have anything else?
Nope.
So do we want to continue to the 26th?
Yes, 26th.
Right, 14 plus 12 is 16. 26.
I will not be here
So,
the 26th
yeah.
or the 27th.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
You have a
Chair.
question?
Yeah, we have a conflict on the 26th, and I don't know if it's, in through Tony, I don't know if it's amenable, it'll all factor in on when BSC can, get the town the proposal and then have presumably whoever that consultant review the stormwater. May dictate, I don't think it makes sense to come back until that report has
Well, we're gonna have
been
to,
reviewed.
vote to approve the peer review cost anyways, right? So at least we'll continue it to that meeting. If we have
And then
the
we'll continue
proposal,
it
we'll
after
just
that.
vote on that.
Gotcha,
and
okay,
then-
okay.
So if we, just to clarify, if we don't appear on the 26th, you'll put us on the agenda to discuss stormwater. If we're not here, do we need to request a continuance from you in advance of that meeting?
Yeah, just email us and it would be the what meeting.
The 10th,
Yeah, October 10th.
I won't be here for that meeting.
All right.
Does it need to get approved?
Well, hopefully we have more members by then.
They can't pre-approve it tonight, subject to.
Okay, so we'll continue to the 12th and then up to the 26th, and then if we're not ready, we'll just vote on the peer review and then continue to the 10th.
Again, Mr. Chair, we're just talking over here. I guess I'll just ask the question instead of assuming. The commission has to approve the peer review. Can it be approved through your staff? Can you empower the staff to approve it? I mean, we know it's BSC, we obviously have good confidence in them. Our interests are obviously time, keep things moving in between. I don't know if the commission is amenable to things like that.
It's up to you. If you guys want me to approve it, I can approve it, I guess, as long as you guys.
We could do it right now, right?
Because we don't do stormwater.
So, subject to, we
what
want to make sure
peer
BSC doesn't get a blank
To say-
check, but.
Well, I mean,
Well,
then
yeah.
you can say, you can ask us for another proposal, I guess.
Right. So I guess, said differently, if Matthew, through his group, can generate the proposal through Tony to distribute it to us just to verify fee and clear conflicts, which I'm sure it'll be fine, if it can be approved offline, between meetings through the chair, so we can get them going sooner rather than later.
They do need the check to clear too.
Yeah, well,
That's
I'm sure once they get it, they're gonna,
We'll overnight the check. Yeah, we just don't want to have it be a month in between
Right.
when we said we were going to get a proposal and then have a month go by before they even get
Right.
engaged. Yeah.
so I'll
Make a
approve it
motion.
once.
Make a motion for what?
Make a motion to have the chairman, through our peer review, approve the stormwater
Peer review.
plan, peer review.
Somebody wanna make a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Unanimous? Now, someone want to make a motion to continue to the 26th?
I'll make a motion, we continue SE 0845630 Summer Street till September 26th.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, hold on.
Sorry.
But if the chair can approve in between meetings, we may not have to be there on the 26th.
Right.
Correct.
So we take the.
Then we'll continue you to the,
You want to do it the double step?
yeah.
Fine, just clarify, no problem.
Yeah, if you don't show, we have nothing to discuss, we can.
Just
We
send
just
an
continue
just send
it
an
to the
email,
next
continue
one.
it to
You got
the
it. Thank you.
October
Thank
10th.
you, just clarifying, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Okay.
Nice.
All right, there's a motion on the table.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Jean? Jean, you there?
I said aye.
Oh.
Oh,
okay.
we didn't hear you.
See, your microphone
Sorry.
stinks now.
Wow.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm sorry, did I hear correctly? It's the 26th, this one is continued to?
Yes.
Yeah, but it sounds like we're not going to really talk about anything till the 10th of October, though.
Okay, yeah, and I will get on Dom to get you quote so that we can keep that moving.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we, push we gotta approve meeting
Thanks,
minutes, or
Natalie.
can we push that to the next meeting?
We can push it back to the next meeting.
No,
I'm gonna do,
maybe two.
we're gonna do the orders of condition for the bridge at the next meeting too. Should. Yeah, 'cause it's 14 days.
14 minutes. Oh, for order of conditions?
Okay. And there were no permits, I didn't sign any, did you sign any?
No.
And there was no correspondence, right? All right, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jean,
I didn't hear the motion.
to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, we're not gonna talk about any of the updates? I thought you were gonna talk about them.
Next meeting.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Good night.